Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Health First Freelancer. My name is Amanda, and I'm your OG Health First Freelancer, and this is not the video I was expecting to make today. But today is actually to the exact day, the 1 year anniversary from when I started doing EMDR therapy. And I actually had a session yesterday with my therapist, which will probably be our last session of this kind of container we've been working in for the last year. And it wasn't necessarily what I was expecting going into that session, that we would be kind of wrapping up for the time being. But we both kind of realized that I was in a good spot to stop for a while. I actually went into the appointment kind of thinking like, I don't really want to go to therapy today. I want to like be outside because it was a really nice day out yesterday. And I talked about that and she was like, well, that's interesting that you say that because I actually want to talk about where we're going to go from here. And maybe this is a good stopping point for you. And I was like, I didn't even think of that because my brain is always like, what's the next thing, like the next level, the next, and in this case, the next kind of like belief we're going to try to change and all that kind of stuff. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that she was right and that was the right direction to move in, that I've actually done the work. And now I'm at a point where I'm ready to see and experience the results of doing that work in my actual life and kind of just see where things go from here, how life goes for a while, potential changes in my business, in my personal life, in my relationships, and kind of just see how I approach those from this kind of new foundation that I've built with EMDR. So, yeah, I kind of just want to talk a little bit about that today and share my experience and some reflections for anyone else who is interested in therapy and EMDR specifically, especially if you have chronic illness or you're trying to work on these more challenging limiting beliefs and like old patterns and trauma that you might have from your childhood, from past relationships, whatever it might be. So, yeah, let me look at my notes. Okay, so looking back on exactly a year ago today, my first session with my therapist, I came to therapy and to EMDR therapy specifically because I realized like I had gotten myself in this pattern of trying to do all this like self work, self reflection, journaling, meditation, affirmations, like hypnotherapy, but kind of doing everything on my own. And I realized I really hit a plateau with that and I could no longer just try to like heal myself in a vacuum, if that makes sense. And I think a lot of us try to do this in like, self-development, personal development space, particularly as business owners, we can easily get sucked into that rabbit hole. But yeah, and I think for a long time, I knew that I needed outside assistance to kind of keep doing this work, but I was resistant, obviously, to doing that, partially because of the vulnerability it would take for me to have a one on one relationship with a therapist and like work on my own, insecurities and limiting beliefs and whatnot. And partially for financial reasons. I knew that it would cost even more money than I'm already spending on my health. I consider this as kind of health adjacent. I was reluctant to make that investment since there was no crisis, there's no like I wasn't falling apart or anything. I was just stagnant. But eventually I did realize that that was the next move. I got so uncomfortable with my stagnantness that I actually looked into finding a therapist. And I came across the therapist that I have now, and she was EMDR trained, and I was interested in that modality. And I knew for me that like I've had just like regular talk therapy before a few times, and I knew that for me that wasn't enough to really make the change I was interested in seeing in myself. I wanted that extra layer of EMDR to have this more like somatic practice built into the therapy to like really work on rewiring my brain and rewiring my nervous system. Neuroplasticity, if you don't know, like the idea that our brains can change, but you really kind of have to tap into this more survival part of your brain, or the parasympathetic part of your brain, maybe, and your nervous system is a better way to say it. So anyway, I found her, and I've completely forgot where I was going with this. Okay, yeah. So I found her, and my initial goal was to connect to my body more. But I think that wasn't actually what the goal was. That was just like the only way I could phrase it. I think from where I'm at now, I know that the goal was to connect to my intuition more, and also to kind of rewire some beliefs around like safety and more ability to be vulnerable in my relationships, and like build more self-worth and self-trust and self-confidence in my personal life, but also as a business owner, and kind of reach the next level. It's not like I didn't have self-worth or I didn't have like trust and belief in myself before, but I knew there was this like subconscious layer that I wasn't reaching. So that's where I wanted EMDR to come in and help me access that part of my brain and that deeper level of my nervous system. Needless to say, it was not as fast of a process as I was hoping it to be, or as I always want things to be. It was probably at least like 3 to 4 months of just kind of regular, quote unquote, regular therapy, to obviously like establish this relationship with my new therapist, and for her to get to know me and like be able to kind of observe my patterns and really get to know who I am as a person and like where I'm at and what I'm trying to accomplish. So that took a while. I think there was also like a long break in there because like there was like I was sick, and then she was sick, and then I was sick again. So at one point I remember it almost kind of felt like we had to start over because we had just had such a long break between sessions. I was doing every other week sessions, by the way. So basically twice a month. Yeah, it wasn't until probably October or November of last year, I want to say, that we actually started the EMDR process and started doing EMDR sessions. And honestly, once I started doing that, it was like, whoa, I can tell my brain is trying to reorganize itself. It's very hard to explain. I remember in the first session we did, she was like prepping me, and she was like, you might be really tired afterwards. You might have brain fog, like just self care, rest, like take care of yourself. And, at the time I was like, okay, whatever, sure. Like I've done everything under the sun. I've done so many frequency medicine treatments and detox programs, and like, all this stuff for chronic Lyme and whatever. I was like, sure, I'll be fine. No, she was right. She was so correct. I remember the brain fog driving home from that session. I was like, whoa. Like I had not experienced that level of brain fog since, much earlier in my Lyme journey. And I remember being like, oh my God, if I had doubts that this was doing anything, all doubts were erased at that moment, because I was like, whoa, like clearly this had some effect on my brain and on those neural pathways to like reorganize themselves, because it seemed like with the brain fog, things were just moving and like changing. And, these kind of old pathways were started to like wake up and reorganize themselves. And yeah, so I had crazy brain fog driving home. I remember that. And then the brain fog went away pretty quickly after that. But then I was so tired. I was like, I thought I was getting sick. That night, I was so tired physically, like my body physically felt drained, that I was like, oh my God, I must be coming down with something. But then after that, the next day I basically felt fine again. So it was really just that kind of first session that had such a profound effect afterwards. And then anytime afterwards, I had maybe one or two other sessions where I felt quite tired afterwards, but then for the most part, I was fine. So that was a very interesting experience. And then it was really kind of starting from the top of this year that I felt like, okay, we're in it now. We're really diving into these sessions and doing the EMDR. And she has like a couple of different modalities that she uses for EMDR. And around maybe February, we found one that like really, really worked for me. The first kind of one she had me do was like holding these buzzer things. And if you don't know, the kind of idea with EMDR is like it sort of distracts your thinking brain so that your subconscious brain can like go and process these old beliefs or these like old stuck emotions kind of thing. That's like a very simplified way of explaining it. Please do your own research, but that's the basic gist. So first I was like using these buzzer things, which worked well and worked well to start off, but then we started using this program called WeMind, which is actually I use my phone, and it has the buzzing effect, but it also has like your eyes follow this like pinging ball back and forth, and you have to like click stuff, but also when you hear noise, you have to like hit a button to turn off the noise. So it's like really distracting your brain, your thinking mind, to be able to allow your kind of feeling brain or your sensory brain to reorganize itself. So we started doing that. And I think that was when I was like, this is a new level. I felt like things were moving even more quickly than they already were. And when I say that, it's hard to like quantify what was actually happening, but I felt like I could go into like a deeper state of hypnosis, sort of, is like the closest feeling I can compare it to, like a really deep hypno state. I could go way deeper into that and, work with any thoughts or sensations that were coming up in my body. For me, it was a lot about tracking sensations in my body and kind of processing through those. So things were, whatever was my body was holding on to, it was really coming up for me as a felt sensation as opposed to like thoughts, which I think was the whole point for me. I needed to get in that somatic state of being instead of being in my brain all the time, which is where I normally live in my everyday life. So starting to do that started to really shift things. And yeah, looking back on it, that's now where I can see is like February, March was the most intense period for EMDR for me. And if you've seen my previous videos, particularly over the last few weeks, you'll know that was I talked about that being my season of rest. And now that I can kind of fully look back on it from, I think, being on the other side of this experience, I truly believe it was because I was doing so much of this internal work, rewiring my brain and changing these like foundational beliefs that I had that were holding me back. Yeah, and I was so tired and so just like needing so much rest and recovery because the brain takes up so much energy. Yeah, your brain takes up something like what, 60% of your energy on a daily basis? That might be wrong. I'll put the statistic in the video. But yeah, I think I was so tired because all this processing was happening, and not just happening in the therapy session itself, but ongoing. My therapist told me that EMDR obviously is happening while you're in the session, but it continues, your brain is continuing to change well beyond just the course of the session. It's actually more like in those in between phases between your appointments that your brain is reorganizing itself and adjusting to these new beliefs that you're trying to instill. So, yeah, it was very, very tiring. And I think I'm really glad that I kind of didn't know what to expect in that sense of how kind of intense, not intense, I don't know if intense is the right word, but like just how much energy this would take. So I just went with it, rested as much as I needed to. And, fortunately, I've set up my business and my life in such a way that that was fully possible for me. And I rolled with it. Challenges and hard moments came up as they do, but I kind of just kept trusting the process through it. And I think it worked. So kind of where I am now, I already kind of talked about this in the beginning of the video, but yeah, I would say especially even just in the last like week or two, it feels like I'm in a new chapter of my life, or maybe even like a new book in the series, if that makes sense. I have felt the internal shift from doing this work and having much more self-confidence and trust in things working out, in the universe, if you prefer, and just kind of more of a foundation of self-worth and belief in myself and knowing that I deserve for things to work out for me and the dreams I have for my life are possible for me. Yeah, and again, it's like it's not that I didn't believe those things before, but now it feels like I've embodied those beliefs. I've like fully internalized those beliefs, if that makes sense. It's very difficult to put into words because it just feels like a new way of existing that I didn't have access to before and I didn't really even know existed before. So it's a very powerful feeling, I would say. I was talking to my therapist yesterday about this, and I do think if I had to kind of boil it down to like what's the one biggest thing that has changed, it is being so much more connected to my intuition, having a much stronger sense of the direction I'm going in and like figuring out the next right moves for me. And also when it comes to people and being able to kind of sense who is good for you and who is not, and being able to trust that sense. Also having some realizations around like what opportunities I want in my business and in my life going forward, and just having more like acceptance around those dreams, I guess, and that those are possible for me. And kind of on the flip side of things, I feel like I don't have as much like general anxiety as I used to, which I think, comes more from this like sense of trust and being connected to my intuition and stuff. But yeah, less anxiety and like faster ability to recover when challenges do come up. Like my nervous system is able to regulate much quicker than I could before. Even just like the fact that I'm tapped into my nervous system at all, I feel like that was one of the major issues I felt like I had when I started therapy, was just feeling very disconnected. Like I had this connection to my body in terms of like symptoms for chronic illness, but that's more sympathetic, in terms of the nervous system. That's more fear-based, I guess. That's kind of trying to protect yourself, like survival. Whereas now I feel like much more connected to the parasympathetic side of the nervous system, rest and digest, being able to listen to those messages from my body when I need something, or listen to my intuition in regards to like external circumstances as well. Yeah, just approaching life more with curiosity and optimism, noticing opportunities as opposed to like just fear and scarcity kind of running the background software, if you will, in my brain. So that is the shift I think I've landed at. And I say, it's funny, I keep saying like, I think, because I feel like it's been a whole year, but I also have some like cognitive dissonance around like, am I really there? Have we really done the thing? So I think I'm still leaning into that. But at the same time, like I trust that yes, like a big shift has happened and this is kind of my new reality now. So I hope that was helpful to share for you all. Just some of my reflections on EMDR therapy over exactly 1 year. It has been a journey, but ultimately, I'm so glad I did this and I'm so glad I invested in myself in this way. And yeah, I can't wait to see the real life results that I feel like are coming into my life soon. Hopefully we'll see what happens, but yeah, I will keep you posted on how things go. If you're interested in me talking more about this, maybe I can make another video talking a little bit more in depth about the actual process of EMDR and like how the sessions went for me. I would be happy to do that. If you're interested, leave a comment, because I do think this is a really fascinating tool and still quite mysterious, I think, for a lot of people. But if you're interested in therapy, if you're interested in kind of the somatic processing work, maybe that would be helpful. So let me know if you'd be interested in that. Leave a comment, and that is something I can expand on for sure. Other than that, if you would like to learn more about me, my chronic illness story, my freelance business, how I built a business that puts my health first, you can check out my other videos on this channel. You can also subscribe to my email newsletter, which is also Health First Freelancer, link in the description. And you can also check out the Health First Freelancer community, where I help you build a freelance business that prioritizes your health, which is what I've done and what has allowed me to do things like EMDR therapy on a Tuesday afternoon every other week without, any oversight from a boss. I just make the schedule and do what I want to do. Actually, that's a really good example of how I prioritize my health in my business. So if that interests you, check out the Health First Freelancer community. Okay, I think that is enough sharing for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will catch you next time. Bye.